Test one, two. Test one, two. Oh, how about now? Maybe now. Okay, now it's working. Test one, two. Okay, yay. All right. So I am so sorry. I'm hoping that the people will come over to this one. I don't know. I get crazy with this stuff. I was talking about the multiverse. I was talking about this show called Fringe that was out about 10 years ago. And this will be recorded. And so um, you'll have to watch the recording. Um, this idea that there are parallel universes happening at the same time. Now, I had a thing happen to me over the weekend. I went out with a friend from school, and if you're watching this, I'm not going to use your name because I don't have permission, but I recall that the brother of this friend played piano. And so I said to him, now I remember seeing him in my mind's eye seated at a grand piano playing for our school. And I just said, it's nice to see you again. And I remember you being such an excellent pianist. And he looked at me really strange because I was never a pianist, I was a drummer. Oh, really? Okay. Well, I don't remember it that way. Another person seated at the table was the husband of my friend, who he and I had worked at the same place. And I don't think he remembered me, and I didn't remember him. And we verified that we worked at the same dinner theater at the same years. We were in the same job, and I don't remember him at all. I remember some things we talked about, but I was thinking, how is it that we could have? Now, I am not saying that anything has to do with the multiverse, but I'm getting older, and I don't think, and I know it's not dementia. I'm just wondering, and I want you guys to check yourselves. You may remember things differently. And like I've had situations in the last 10 years where I've remembered something and then I've questioned my memory. Did I really remember that correctly? And then I've called friends and I said, did this actually happen? Like, did this certain thing happen? Well, I'll give you a bunch of examples today. Well, anyway, I'm getting together for breakfast with my friend from high school who I had not seen for 50 years, 50 years. We were friends in high school. We played in the band together. Lost touch. She found me on Facebook. She said, I'm going to be in Minneapolis. Let's get together, have breakfast. So we did. Met her husband, met her brother, brother's partner, and my partner and I, six of us, right? And my memory was that her brother was a pianist, a good pianist. Now, I also remember that he was a typist and that he typed 120 words a minute. And he verified that, in fact, yes, he could type 120 words a minute, but that he was very much not a pianist, that he was a drummer. Now, as I thought about it, I could not capture an image of him at a drum set. I could only capture an image of him at a piano. Now I am, with all this stuff, by the way, it's not about being right. I am not saying that I'm right. This is a question. Like, that's really interesting that I'm seated directly across from my friend's husband, and he and I worked at the same place in the same years in the same exact job. I don't remember him at all, and he didn't act like he remembered me at all. Now, we were very different. I was 14, 15, 16. He was a couple of years older than me, maybe a year older than me, but you'd think that I would remember him. I remember the older brother of my friend, and I remember very, very clearly an image of him at a piano. And he was fine. It was like, oh, I guess I remembered it wrong. But this calls forth this idea, and this show Fringe that I'm talking about, you can look it up, Fringe, talked about basically two different realities. Now, the characters are the same, meaning that the people are the same, the individuals are the same type of general people, but the world was very different. And then the show is about, basically, there was one or two people that could cross through these different dimensional portals and that kind of thing. And I think it's just a fascinating idea. So that I studied with Brian Weiss, the noted hypnotherapist, psychiatrist who wrote Many Lives and Many Masters. And for a decade, I followed him around. I stalked him and attended many of his trainings, became certified by the Weiss Institute in past life regression. And that's how I started my career in hypnotherapy. The show was called Fringe, Fringe. I'm just looking at thank you guys for coming over here. I think I figured out the issue with my sound. I just put the microphone on and it popped up. And I digress. Oh, Brian Weiss. So I ended up being a demo subject for him, meaning that he would do these trainings, and I would volunteer to be regressed on stage. And I had had quite a already a career and I'd been meditating for a long time. And he always had this theory that people who meditated went into trance easily, and that he would kind of joke, and he called me a sure thing. That he knew that if I was going to be a demo subject, I would go down, and I wouldn't fight with him, and I would go into trance and that kind of thing. And so, are we the same Brian Weiss working at 2017 Chicago? Yes, absolutely. And so this was earlier than 2017. My last training was in 2005. But Brian is in his 80s now. He lovely guy, lovely guy, Riley. But yes, same Brian Weiss, Dr. Brian Weiss wrote Many Lives, Many Masters, wrote Through Time into Healing, a number of New York Times best-selling books on past life regression. Now, again, this is under the context of universal consciousness. And as we evolve and as we become, and I teach in the realm of hypnotherapy, I teach in the realm of psychic development, intuitive awareness, the other side, near-death experiences, that kind of thing, as it relates to human healing now in the present, because I think that's the most important thing. And that a lot of times the readings that I do are really helpful for people to make progress and heal in their own whatever they're going through. So I had been regressed a number of times over a decade, working with Brian, 1995 to 2005. And I'm just going to cut to the chase. In my hypnotherapy certification training, which happened in 2005 in Austin, Texas, it was a 5-day training for clinicians. Basically, you had to be a licensed clinician to take this 5-day training. It was not unlike a trainer's training. For those of you that have done NLP, it was an advanced, like his highest level advanced training. And there were a lot of people in the audience, a couple thousand. And it was at a big conference center, a very nice conference center in Austin, Texas. And he asked me to, get on the stage. And so, long story short, he asked for to volunteer. I raised my hand. He knew who I was. He knew me by name. Let me get this straight. When I say that I studied with Brian Weiss, I don't want you to think I lived with him. We were not friends, but I was a groupie. I was not unlike the people that go to, Tony Robbins trainings or Matt James trainings or Joe Dispenza trainings. And I would just show up at all these trainings, and I volunteered at enough of his trainings that he knew who I was. And so he said, yeah, well, Patrick, come on up. So I went up and put the microphone just like this on my lapel, and he takes me to trance. Now, there are two people in the world that can bring me down into trance, and one of them is Matt James, Dr. Matt James, or my Kumu, my teacher, and Brian Weiss. Man, I hear their voice, and I just go right down. Now, I get accused of being that voice for many people now, because people listen to my recordings, and they have lots of, and I am that anchor. That voice is the anchor, and I totally understand. I get it, because I've had teachers, man, that just put me right down. It's wonderful to have a voice that's safe, that will help you go into trance like that. So I get on stage, and he takes me through it's a very standard protocol for past life regression. Many of you have studied with me. You know what it is. You go down a set of stairs, then another set of stairs, and you see 3 doorways. And I have it, I use his script for my past life regression sessions with my clients. And, you go into a systematically relaxed state, and he says, okay, you're now in this new world. Look down at your feet. And I'm saying, okay, I'm a female, and I have white skin, and I'm wearing flat shoes, and I'm on a hillside, and it's grassy, and looks to be about the 1940s Central Europe. I look down, and I see and I know that it's Salzburg, Austria. I can see the palace. I think it's called the Schönbrunn Palace. Don't quote me on that. And I can see it. I know the area well. I lived in that area as a youth. I know Salzburg, and I'm wearing a white dress, and I'm on this hillside, and I get it. And he just keeps asking me questions. Now I'm in trance, and this is being recorded. And I think it was videotaped, just I think it was videotaped back in the day, VHS. I don't know. And I said, well, I'm a female. I'm probably in my late 20s. I know that I work as a governess for a very powerful family in Salzburg. It's a military family. And I know that my job, in addition to taking care of a bunch of kids of this military captain or something, that my job is to liberate the Jews, and that I'm an instrumental figure in liberating the Jews. And I go through this whole thing. And it's recorded, it's documented. I don't, if people ask me, well, where are these recordings? I don't know. This was, pre-internet. We didn't have the internet. We might have had the internet, but I don't know where these recordings are. Anyway, so he brings me out, 3, 2, 1, snaps his fingers, and I come out of trance. And I look at him and I said, Brian, I mean no disrespect. Now, remember, historically, I'm a scientist, I'm a researcher, I'm an academician, I'm a college professor. I've done research. I was the psychic brick. I didn't know if I couldn't see it and taste it and touch it, it didn't exist. And so my foray into hypnosis and the unconscious mind for me was fraught with a lot of confusion and a lot of questions like, this just doesn't make sense. And I could get through it by going, oh, it's a dream. It's just like a dream. It's imagery. It's in the recesses of the unconscious mind. It's not real. I mean, dreams aren't real. None of this is real. I'm just making it up. And I didn't get. I would kind of go with some of these visions and these past lives. And prior to this session in 2005, I had been regressed not only by him but by other people that I had studied with and worked with, and I'd done my own work. And I just think, okay, it's just. I explained it away by saying. It's an artifact, it's a dream. It's not a memory because it's not real. And so but when I got out of trance and he, snapped his fingers, I said, Brian, now I know I'm making this up. And he was great. Very peaceful guy, very chill, very, very, very kind, a very kind man, if you ever have a chance to meet him. And he says, well, why would you say that? And I said, well, Brian, this is like the 6th Holocaust lifetime that I've had. I've been a soldier at Dachau. I've been a Russian soldier liberating Bergen-Belsen. I've been a gay person. I've been a Jew. I've been, this and that and the other thing. And now I'm freaking Julie Andrews in The Sound of Music. And that was the imagery. And again, for those of you that are very young, you're not going to know the reference, but there was a movie in 1965 with Julie Andrews called The Sound of Music, based on a Broadway Rodgers and Hammerstein play, The Sound of Music. And you can look it up, and Julie Andrews played that character that I described. And so I'm just saying, Brian, I'm just making it up. Now I know. And I wasn't trying to be contentious. I wasn't trying to be difficult. I think the reason he appreciated me is that I was always very transparent about my experience. I was always very transparent that I just didn't believe this crap. I was like, I'm just making it up. Now how could I? And I said to him, forgive me. I'm not trying to ruin your training here, but how is it this is my 6th Holocaust lifetime. How can I have simultaneously existed in 6 lifetimes at the same time period of human history? And he paused and he says, well, we really don't talk a lot about it. He was very peaceful. He was not flapped at all. I don't think the man has a flappable thing in his body. Very, very, very calm guy. And he goes, we don't talk about this, but one thing that we haven't talked about is the multiverse, and that there are, in theory, because he's a scientist also, he's a medical doctor, a psychiatrist. He's published a textbook in addition to all of his New York Times best-selling books. And he was right with me. He was right. He goes, I totally understand your point of view and I understand your concern. But he said, we don't really understand, and this is coming up more in past life regression, that how is it that I can have all of these different lifetimes? And how is it that I've channeled, and they've been recorded and documented. And I remember, I can go into them. Most of you have not heard all the other lifetimes. So there is a theory that our physical body will carry over some elements of a previous life. Now, the Dachau prison guard, I was a guard. Again, one of the lifetimes. Now, what I'm talking about now is one of the past life regressions. I was a guard at the concentration camp Dachau in Germany, in southern Germany. When I visited there as an exchange student, I knew the layout. This was in part of my journey. I knew the layout. I couldn't know it. So I did some research. Then I did the regression later and figured out that it went right to I was a prison guard. that was there at Dachau, and I was killed by at the liberation of the camp, and I was shot in the head. And in this body, in this head, I have a bump right here, and I have a bump over here. Now, what I got intuitively was that was the entrance and exit wound of that episode in that lifetime in that body. Now, everything that I say to you, I can't prove anything. And I talk to you about these things because I want to normalize it. And I want people, what I hear a lot of times in my classes, that people have also had similar experiences. And so I want to demystify this. I don't understand what it means. All I know is that I have an entrance and an exit wound, and I was killed, again, according to this lifetime, this regression in trance that was documented. Well, that was one of 6 Holocaust lifetimes. The last one that I did in 2005 was this Julie Anderson, The Sound of Music. Now, it brought down the house because people, remember, this was 21 years ago. And I was talking to people who was very much aware of who Julie Andrews was and what The Sound of Music was, and it just brought down the house. I mean, it was a showstopper. They just thought that was the one, because I was in trance describing this young white woman who, and it was the story of Maria von Trapp and the Trapp Family Singers. And well, it wasn't Maria von, well, yes, it was. Anyway, I'm not going to go into the whole, script of the movie or the show, but it is a very recognizable story. And I did it word for word as a past life regression. And he said, we don't really talk about this because we don't know how to research it. We don't know how to research a multiverse. But there is an idea out there that we are in these bodies, and simultaneously there are other versions of us happening in other bodies, in other dimensions, in other universes, if you will. And as I get older and as I kind of go down my path and I do things, I'm having a lot more experiences. And so I'm going to share some of those with you today, because I don't want you to be afraid, number one. Number two, I want you to not think you're crazy. So let's talk about the Mandela effect. Now, I would encourage you to look it up. There is a thing in the public discourse now called the Mandela effect. Now, it is named after the South African president Nelson Mandela, who was imprisoned for 27 years prior to being released, just for being black. And he was released. He went on to become president of the African National Congress, and he has passed away. He's a very, very famous figure. I think he won the Nobel Prize. He's a very, very famous international figure. And he and the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, and I mean, he's among Queen Elizabeth. Very, very famous thing. Now, there are people who have come forward that have a memory that Nelson Mandela died in prison. And they're just like, no. Nelson Mandela never was released from prison. He died in prison. And there are historical archives that show that he died in prison. Then there are others of us that know he got out of prison, and his wife Winnie divorced him, and apparently she was, and there's a whole story. There are different timelines. Now, and if you research it, and I encourage you to, because I want to demystify some of this stuff, because I have my own experiences of it. The guy, whether he was a pianist or a drummer, is just this weekend's example of. Now, it totally is absolutely possible that I just don't remember it correctly, and that's what's going on for me at my age. I'm 66. I'll be 67 in August. I'm starting to have memories, and then I'm just questioning them. Okay, I guess Steve was not ever a pianist. He was a drummer. But then as I thought, I was like, I have all these like vivid images of him in the high school gym and the high school theater playing piano, seeing him at a grand piano, thinking, my God, this guy is just so brilliant. And this weekend said, Steve, I just remember you being such a great pianist. And he looked at me and goes, I was never a pianist. I mean, because I took 2 months of piano lessons, but I was a drummer. I was always a drummer, and I'm still a drummer. Okay. And I didn't quite. I mean, who am I to question it? He's a drummer. He's a drummer. I remember it differently. So, the Mandela effect, theoretically, is that there are multiple timelines happening simultaneously, and that what's happening as the vibration of the Earth changes, and things like the Schumann resonance is emerging, which is this gamma radiation that's hitting the Earth, is that timelines are collapsing. Now, I don't really understand it. And so I'm not going to give you a great explanation of this, but I want you to understand that you can do your own research. And particularly if you've had the experience where you remember something from your childhood and you say it to a family member, they go, that never happened. Or no, we never lived there. Or no, it wasn't like that. It was called this. For example, and I know there are Star Wars people here. Lucasfilm, Star Wars 1977, the original film, there was a character called C-3PO, an android, a gold from head to toe android. I remember because I saw that movie 27 times that summer. That's when we would go to the theater and you'd pay your money. And I saw it 27 times with my friends. I was in high school. C-3PO was gold from head to toe. Gold metal, right? I mean, not necessarily the precious metal gold, but he was a gold figure, a gold robot. Well, now, if you look up C-3PO, he has a silver leg. One of his legs is silver, a la he had some parts replaced, and they replaced it with silver or metal, steel looking. No. And if you look, there are now depictions of him with a silver leg and not a gold leg. And no, I would notice. I would have noticed. I was such a Star Wars nerd that there is no frickin' way that I remember that C-3PO had a silver or a steel looking leg. And there are dozens and dozens of examples. And this is called the Mandela effect for this idea that there's a portion of the population who remember. This is not about news. This is not about, remember, this is pre-internet. This is not about what was online, and it's not AI. This is all before then, that they remember that Nelson Mandela died in prison. I remember he became the president of the African National Congress. And Margot Hecht is telling me C-3PO is always totally gold. Now, this is where we get into the am I crazy? And this is why I'm having this talk today, because I know I'm not crazy. I know Margot Hecht is not crazy. I know Joshua Hayduk is not crazy. I know Riley Burris is not crazy. We are not crazy. So I want you to look, and there's so many examples. So the Ford logo for the Ford automobile, there's a Ford logo that I remember that was just, kind of a script F-O-R-D in an oval blue thing. Well, according to the Mandela effect things, there was some sort of a curly Q extra line that did not exist. And so if you look up the Ford logo, it has this little extra thing. It wasn't there when I was a kid. So then I just assume, because I'm so rational, well, of course, they changed it. What's, big deal. They change logos all the time. Oh, no. They did not change it. Historically, if you look back now, the weird thing, and this is where I get confused, is we do have the internet. We do have AI, and we have recorded things and put it online. Books, understand that all of recorded history is not online, obviously. The Akashic records are not online, even though I had watched a guy, really cute guy, where he uses AI. He talks to Claude or ChatGPT or whatever, and he says, Siri, according to the Akashic records, blah, 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 and he'll ask questions. And then the AI bot will, pretend to pontificate as if they were the Akashic records. But we know that not everything that's ever been recorded is online. There have been studies of and I'll talk about that in a minute, where...
Okay. I found this on the web for according to Akashic Records Reader.
This is
Check
funny.
it out.
My phone is now responding. I'm going to go grab my phone so that Siri doesn't continue. I love her. She's so great. And I made the mistake. I said it. I said, hey, Siri. Okay. And so do your own research. Check it out. Now, those of us that are over 50, this is when it happens. I had a situation that some of you heard me tell the Tina Turner story, where I was at a Buddhist meeting in Los Angeles in 1980, mid 1980s. And some of you have heard the story, and basically I was running late to this meeting. I was in my stuff. I was 25. I was having and I got to this meeting late, and it was packed. And in those days, we would go to Buddhist meetings in people's homes, and it was in the living room, and there was nowhere to sit. And I got there late, and I stood at the doorway. It was this California bungalow. It was in Brentwood, and I'll never forget that. This is my memory now. And a woman waved at me, and she kind of cleared the place. She was a black woman, and she had me sit down and made a place for me. She was very sweet, Well, long story short, everybody's all excited about this meeting, and then the MC gets up and says, "We're welcome. We have a special guest today, and we're so excited to hear Tina's experience." And I'm still not getting it, not getting, anything. And other parts of the meeting happen, and then the MC says, "Okay, now we're going to hear from our good friend Tina." Well, the woman next to me, the black woman, she was wearing a denim skirt with a white t-shirt. She had ashy legs, like black people do sometimes, like kind of dry skin. And she had no wig, no makeup, she looked like a African-American grandmother, motherly maternal figure. No makeup, no, just little pigtails. I remember that. Got up. It was Tina Turner, right? It was Tina Turner. Now, I still didn't get it. She's talking, and I'm hearing, like the Charlie Brown teacher, because I'm stressed. I don't even know what was going on in my life at the time. And then I heard, all I heard was, and then Private Dancer went platinum, which is her big album, first big album as a rock star, basically, Private Dancer. And I got it, and I was like, that's Tina Turner. Well, I questioned that memory. I thought I made it up. I thought I dreamt it. So this was a couple years ago, because I was telling the story, and I thought, I think I'm just making this up. I don't think that really happened. So I contacted the then chapter leader of that Buddhist chapter, and I just called her. I said, "You remember Patrick Scott from LA?" She goes, "Oh, of course, Patrick. How are you? Good old time." And then I asked her, "Did that actually happen?" She goes, "Yeah, that actually did happen." So if you're starting to question your memory and whether or not, because it really calls into question everything when you remember something differently than others, like Star Wars. And so if you do your research on the Mandela effect, check it out. There are a number of examples like that. And a lot of them have to do with something, the Berenberg Bears or something. And there's a very just slight differences in the name. I'm not going to get that name right. There's different logos, little Debbie things like Hostess Ho-Hos and Ding Dongs. And Star Citizen says Rex. I don't know what Rex is. Tell me more about that. There are differences. And so the theory, as the theory goes, as I've investigated it, we have these parallel timelines. And so then it calls forth, Berenstein Bears, but then apparently there's some other version of that. It wasn't the Berenstein Bears, it was the Berenberg Bears or something. And people say, no, I remember it very clearly, very clearly. I'm not crazy. Reach out, Kuma. I'll make it make sense in a way that will blow your mind. I love it. And Starseed Self-Caring, give me your name, because I don't know who you are. So if you just give me your first name, I'll tell you. Because it's really fun for me. Oh, that's Amber. I love Amber. Okay. Amber. Okay. So I want you to look at your memories. And it calls forth so when I said to Brian Weiss, and I said, "Brian, now I'm just making this up. This has got to be just my imagination." And he paused and he goes, "Well, what's the difference?" "What?" "I'm freaking Julie Andrews in The Sound of Music. I'm not Julie Andrews in The Sound of Music." He goes, "Well, what if you were?" "What?" "Well, what if you were? What if an aspect of yourself was either that character, or what if a portion of your soul occupied that person at that time? Or what if that's such a powerful memory that listen to the language, an aspect of your soul, or a portion of you, or a portion of your consciousness related to that character or that actress or that situation?" And what was funny, I started to twitch. I was just like, okay, we need to stop because I couldn't process it. And this is 20 some years later. I can process it now, but I understand that there's stuff that we don't know, that we can't know, that we're not supposed to know, I guess. And so I'd love for you to take a look at your timeline and take a look at some of your memories. I have noticed that my siblings, I have two siblings, one of whom has passed, they would fight. They would have different memories of our mother or our father, or different memories of the house that they grew up in. And they would get into kind of pissing contests about, no, this was the address. No, this was the address. And now I'm wondering, did they have different timelines? Did they have different experiences? Or were they just wrong? Did one of them just get it wrong? And that it calls into question. And so talk to your siblings. Take a look at, now the reason this is important, if it is that I want you to understand that there's so much more going on than we give ourselves credit for. A lot of my work, I had a client right before this YouTube live, and she asked for a reading, and I just channeled into Nigeria. And I said, I don't know, I'm seeing Nigeria. I don't know why it's Nigeria, but I'm seeing this, and it has to do with that something's coming up. Now, again, I do readings for the purposes of healing. And I said, and she goes, well, I grew up in Nigeria. I went, what? What do you mean you knew? She goes, I grew up in Nigeria. I said, well, what's coming up is, and I just started to say that there are these people and I'm starting to see them and that they were domestics or teachers or religious figures or something. And I just kind of started reading it. And she says, well, that's really funny that you should say that, because I've been thinking a lot lately about Nigeria and my experience in Nigeria and what it has to do with what's going on in my life right now. I've lost a sibling. I've got another sibling who's ill, and so on. And again, I'm doing a reading. And so the juxtaposition of the psychic phenomena, the readings, and that my talking to the other side and getting feedback from the other side. And I do have a felt sense, because I have had near-death experiences, of what that feels like over there, that it's not like it is here. And when I joke with some of the guides, and I have a very physical based sense of things, they don't eat food. I mean, they can, but they don't need to. They don't breathe air. They don't have physical bodies. And when I've gotten a felt sense of what it's like, it can be whatever we make it to be. So if you've seen the movie with Robin Williams, it's an older film now, What Dreams May Come, you can look that up too. What Dreams May Come. I've heard from my guides and people that is probably the most accurate depiction of the way the other side works. If you want to do more research in terms of psychics and intuitives that have spent time on the other side, with Sylvie Brown, Adventures of a Psychic, will describe in great detail. And what they're saying is that it's a different dimension, it's a different vibration, but it's very much like it is here. There are buildings and trees and fields, and it's beautiful. It doesn't have maybe necessarily the pollution and the suffering and a lot of the stuff that we have here, but it's very much looks like, and that it's not way up there, that it exists as a vibration about 5 feet above our current vibration, which is why when I see a ghost or an apparition, they kind of look like they're floating in the air, because they are in our air, but they're just doing their life at this vibrational thing. And so it's starting to explain for me my experiences of when I do see otherworldly entities or beings, why they look like they're floating in the air. Because then if you buy the argument that the other side is not so far away, that it is right here, or when our dearly departed loved ones make their presence known, or they show us things, that it appears to be very close, it's because they are very close and you can feel them and that kind of thing. And I say this not being able to prove a damn thing. I can only share with you my felt sense and my experience, and that I want you to have your own experiences of what that is. And I think we're in a really wonderful time and place now where I think we can talk about it. I think that's for me what's fun, is that who did I have recently? I think I had somebody in a class that says, yeah, it was a class. It was my Integral Life Master Class. And so the master classes, we get up together monthly for 2 hours. and it's advanced level practitioners, people who are level 4 of Huna or above, or they've asked to be part of this group. And this week we had a guest. We had a person who came and wanted to help us with some healing. And so we get together as a group, as 15, 20 people, and we do some group healing, and I do some channeling and some reading and all that kind of thing. And what was really fun, I think, for the participant, the person who was our guest, was that it validated a lot of his his feelings. Whereas if he were to talk openly about some of his suspicions or some of his concerns, he would have been called delusional. He would have been called crazy, and it was very validating for him. When me, I'd never met him before, reading him, just reading the energy, and he was like, oh my gosh, you're getting it, like, you get it, you see me for who I am. And then we did some work on healing and some energy work and energy healing that was really powerful for him, and that's really fun. And so my life's purpose now is to demystify this stuff, to make it applicable to everyone, to make it accessible to everyone. My opinion is that we all have these same abilities, that I'm not unique, I'm not special. I didn't used to be able to do this stuff. And my attitude is, if I could do it, you all can do it too. I think it's really great. And so I'm wondering if there are any, Fruit of the Loom was another one, Amber's saying. I'm just trying to, so I'm wondering if there are any questions about the either the Mandela effect, about past life regression, about the other side. I think there's a lot of examples out there now. Now, if you know John Edward is a very noted psychic and intuitive and medium, and he is clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient. And I just saw an interview with him. Now, I used to watch him in the 90s. I swear that man has not aged a day. Look at him. Look him up. He has not aged a day. He's got to be in his 50s or 60s. He's got to be. He has not aged a day. He looks exactly the same as he did 30 years ago. I swear. And he works with many, many people and has. And what I love about him is that he's very matter of fact. It's not like it's just a normal thing for him. And Amber says, the other side I used to, but shut down due to lack of training. And that's what I do. The training that I do in terms of the STFU training, the psychic development training, the PIMP training coming up here, the realm travel, certainly all the Huna stuff is intended to help people really access and not be afraid, to demystify it. Not for anything other than safety and security and peace and tranquility, and the ability to understand that we're all capable and that we're all vibrational beings. We all have access to the same information, and that to not write off your hunches, not write off and by the way, we are not objective about ourselves. And so I'm certainly not psychic about myself or things that are close to me. I can be very psychic about other people and about other situations. And that's why it looks to other people, looks like, wow, it's so amazing. Well, I think we're all the same way. Notice how great you are at helping others with their problems, right? You can see through somebody else's issues very quickly because it's not you. When it is you, you're too close to it. And I dream of sitting with John Edward. Yeah, he's been coming out more lately, and I don't know if he has a show, but I've been seeing him online more. I know that he still does public appearances and things like that. He seems like a wonderful guy. I've never met him. I just followed him so much. I think it was the 90s when he had that show, Crossing Over, I think it was called. And it was a show, and he would have a studio audience, and he would come out, and he would just come out and start reading. And he goes, I'm getting a female figure to somebody's right side. It's a maternal figure. The name is Mary. Does anybody know Mary? And somebody would start crying, it's my mom, and they would start talking about Mary who just passed. And he did that, and it was amazing. Now, I did talk to people who had been in the studio audience, a couple people over the years, and they said that, they would like they would do a show, they would record a number of shows in a single day, and that they edited it out, that it wasn't a slam dunk. It wasn't like he came in and every single time he got hits, but they would have to edit out the times where he could, he wasn't getting anything or nothing was coming through. But so that what you saw on the air was pretty much a continuous stream of when he did get hits and people. And again, his whole mission appears to be healing, to help people heal from grief. And that's his thing. James Van Prague is another. Tyler Henry is a younger man now, probably not even 30, who is really, really profound. And so if you're interested in him, you can look him up. He has, and a lot of these on Netflix have a lot of shows now that I really recommend that make it just really kind of mainstream. And what I'm also, by the way, following for you that are interested in, because there's been a lot of the client we had in our master class the other night sees himself, and I see him as a spiritual warrior, and so he's kind of at the front of the battle between good and evil energetically. That there's a lot of evil forces and good forces on the planet, and he sees himself that way. And I saw him that way, and I called him out, and he said nobody ever sees that. He was impressed that I could see that, and I was going somewhere with that. And so there are a number of shows that talk about near death experiences, and there are a number of shows around psychics and mediums and intuitives. There are also two Vatican ordained exorcists from the Catholic Church that have YouTube channels. And of course, I'm not going to remember their names, but you could look up YouTube Catholic exorcists, and I'm sure they'll come up. There's two of them, two guys. And some of them have been on various podcasts, and they talk again. This is their job. They do this every day. And I've said this to several groups lately. I'm really impressed with the Catholic Church. I'm not Catholic. I was not raised Catholic. But the one thing the Catholic Church has is resources, and it keeps statistics and data. And what I appreciate about these they're two different guys. I think they know each other, but I don't think they're like together. I don't think they work. I think they work in different parts of the world, different parts of the country. But they talk about their experiences with exorcisms. And what I really appreciate, oh, nice. I'm not reading this. My dad trained them. They are wrong, sadly. Okay, well, what is interesting about their point of view is that before someone gets to an exorcism with the Catholic Church, is they have to have a thorough psychological evaluation to rule out schizophrenia or, psychological problems, delusions, hallucinations, and they have to have a thorough medical exam, and that's paid for by the church. And this is what they're saying, is that you don't just get an exorcism because you think you're possessed. And I appreciate that. And the psychologists they use they're paid for. They're not hired by they're hired by the church, but they're not church members, and the medical evaluation. So they're independent kind of evaluations. Now, I don't agree, and I think what Amber's getting at is I don't agree all the time with the how do I say it? The dogma, that they interpret otherworldly beings through a very Catholic lens. They're going to do that, just like any religious figure is going to use the Bible or the Quran or the Torah or pick your sutra. They're going to interpret it. And so, for example, both of these exorcists say that, a Ouija board, which I had as a kid, is a gateway to hell. It's a gateway to demonic activity. I don't have one. I wouldn't do one. I mean, I wouldn't do a Ouija board. And I don't know if some of you may know what a Ouija board is. It's OUJIA, I think. And it's a board, and you put your hands on this thing, and it's kind of a party thing, and it would answer. It's like a form of applied kinesiology. It would say yes and no, and it would point to certain letters and that kind of stuff. I remember having one as a kid and thought it was just so cool. I don't think anybody, my friends, got possessed or I got possessed, but they have a real strong feeling that when you're accessing psychic phenomena, or that when a psychic is reading your dead relatives, that could be a demon, or that could be another worldly figure that is a shapeshifter. And they're very cautious about those kinds of things. I tend to take all of it with a grain of salt. I have had my own experiences. I want you to have your own experiences. The most important thing for us all to realize and remember is that we are very powerful, that in the physical, we are more powerful than any other worldly being. We are in the physical. We have a physical manifestation. And so I work with a lot of people who contact me. Father Chad, that sounds familiar. And they're just afraid. And so I have a woman right now who's in one of my classes, and it's a regularly occurring class. And she's very intuitive, and she feels like she attracts spirits and things into her room. And so I said, well, rather than being afraid, how about you just talk to it? And well, I'm so scared. I said, well, that's okay. But understand that if there is this negativity, they feed on negativity, they feed on fear. and you can ask any unwanted energy to leave. You have, and if you look at, and I have looked at the Catholic exorcism rite, meaning I have read the exact language that they use because it's available online. That's all they're doing. I mean, they're in the name of Christ, be gone, kind of thing. And so, I'm not trying to belittle any of this. I think it's very powerful, and I have had my own experience working with unwanted energies and unwanted things, and I've helped people clear them. Many, many people clear them. The class on whatever night it was, I think it was Wednesday night, this man had something in him that was an unwanted energy, a trapped energy that felt demonic. Ultimately to the group. I didn't feel it, but they did. And we removed it, and I showed them a technique on how to remove it. And so don't take my placid demeanor to mean that I don't believe or that I'm somehow skeptical. I kind of believe in all of it, and the point of view is understand my life's purpose is to help others heal, to help others be empowered, to help others bring light into their lives. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to sit here and criticize someone else's model of the world. They're not asking me for my opinion of whether or not demons exist or entities exist or the devil exists or things like that. I think it would be a foolish point of view to believe that if we have light, that dark didn't exist. This is in Huna we talk about the original dichotomy that they call Kane Navahine, meaning out of source comes the male-female dynamic, and that the law, the Huna laws of empowerment, this is the Hawaiian stuff that I teach now, is that everything exists in dichotomy. How would we know? Neil Donald Walsh in the Conversations with God, his whole huge book series from the 90s and early 2000s, talks about the only way we know something is by its opposites. How do we know dark if we don't know light? How do we know up if we don't know down? The theory of relativity, Albert Einstein. The theory of relativity, meaning as everything only exists in relation to something else. So this is not weird. This is not odd. And even though in Huna we are open only to the light and we are only wanting the light, that doesn't deny that the dark exists. I mean, if you look around the world, sorry, evil exists. If you look around and watch the news for 2 minutes, evil exists. There are people out there that will do harm to others. And sometimes I have been, I'm not comparing my trauma to anybody else's trauma. I have been victimized in many shapes and sizes and ways over the years. I suspect many of you have been victim to things. Unsavory characters, bad relationships, being stolen from, being assaulted, being harmed. Now, from the point of view of the other side, that's how we grow. Now I can hear somebody go, well, fuck you. Why was I abused? Or why was I abandoned? Or why was my family poor? Why couldn't we all be born into lives of privilege? And as the theory goes, and we're going to conclude with this, spiritually, apparently, we don't grow when it's easy, when it's comfortable, when it's risk-free, when it's overnight, and so apparently we have lifetimes that are kind of called coasting lifetimes. We're born into great privilege. Even Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, this story, or look at Jesus, look at Buddha, look at the Muhammad, look at anybody, look at the Dalai Lama, born, identified as a Lama, right? The Dalai Lama, and then ripped from his parents and then ripped from his country and exiled, away from his own country of Tibet, and is now a religious figure, to millions of people. Look at Nelson Mandela, right? Persecuted. It's what we do to our leaders. We persecute them. We assassinate them. Abraham Lincoln, John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and so on. And so we don't, and think about the times of your own growth, your own spiritual growth and development. And Amber says, what's the point? Are we have as pieces of humor for the gods? I don't know. Amber, it's a great question. Is this to, and when I channel the other side, forgive me, but they are decidedly non-sentimental. They're very loving, but it's a very divine love. It's all of this wonderful, beautiful bunny, rainbow, unicorn energy. And when I try to ask them, because sometimes my clients will ask me to ask them very specific questions about very earthbound things about why did my mother abuse me, or why did my dad abandon me, or why did, and what they go back to similarly was that you agreed on that on the other side, that you agreed for those challenges. I don't know that they laugh at us. They might. I know that there have been times when I've had clients ask me to ask their guides very specific questions about very earthbound things, and I could just kind of feel the eye roll. Like, I haven't been in a body for 1,000 years. Why are you asking me about, whether you should have Chipotle or Del Taco today? I don't eat food. Why are you at, I'm a great spiritual being, whatever. Why are you asking me about which software package to use? That kind of thing. So they do have a sense of humor. And I would like to think that it's all in good fun. I got to tell you, the energy that I pick up when I've been on the other side and when I go there in trance and I astral project is really wonderful. And when my sister passed, I'll leave you with this. My sister passed away in 2004. She had lung cancer, and from diagnosis to death, it was 5 weeks. And so it was very fast. And she just went down very, very quickly. She was an avid smoker. She was 60 years old. And I was in the cancer center with her. She did do some chemotherapy to try to slow down the progress of the tumors and things, but she had stage 4 lung cancer. And we sat there in the smoking lounge at the hospital, by the way, and we would roll her IV pole down and we would sit for hours. She'd just smoke cigarette after cigarette. And we would joke about how, the horse had left the barn. There's no point in quitting smoking now that she was going to pass away. And she said, I want to come to you. Now, she was not a religious person. She was not a spiritual person, but she said, I want to come to you. I'm going to make a determination that I'm going to come to you after I pass. And I want to let you know what it's like on the other side. Because I think I think you should know. And I think you believe in that stuff. I don't know if I believe in it, but if it is within my power as a soul to come through to you after I pass, I'm going to do it. So I remember the day I was in Lima, Ohio, which is south of Toledo, north of Dayton, and I was teaching at a hospital, doing my teaching hospital work. And she was in hospice, and she was very near the end. And the doctor had gotten on the phone in the morning when I'd started my class and said, it doesn't look good. I was in day 2 of a 3-day class that I was teaching to nurse leaders, nurse managers, and healthcare leaders, physicians, things like that. Some of you know that's work that I do, done it for years. And he said, this was like the first break of the morning, about 10:30. He said, look, she's probably not going to make it through the night. You should probably come home. And if you want to be with her, she's probably not going to make it through the night. So I said, okay, thank you. I taught my next segment of the class. And then I got a call from my niece by marriage, basically my sister's son's wife, and said that she had passed, like at lunch, like right around noontime. She'd already passed. So but I was going to go home anyway. I planned to go home anyway and see her. And I got in the car, and I had a co-trainer, and I said, this 3rd day you're with my co-trainer, you're in good hands. And I just told him, I said, look, I'm having a family emergency. And I don't think I told him the whole story, but I said, look, I really need to go. It's an emergency. And I made my goodbyes, and I'm driving the hour plus it is from Lima to Dayton. And I heard in the car, just myself, and I'm upset because my sister had died. I mean, she had just died. And I heard in the most clear as a bell, distinct Minnesota accent that she had, oh, Pat, it's real nice over here. I wouldn't have been so scared if I knew how nice it is over here. It's real good over here now. And that very distinct, clear as a bell. I'm crying. My sister had just died. And she did. She came to me. She came to me and she reassured me that she was okay, that everything was okay. And I just laughed and cried. I'm a mess. I'm a snotty mess, that my older sister had passed. And she shared, that everything was okay. And her voice was unmistakable. It was not, and then I go back as a therapist. I go, well, did I make that up? Was that a hallucination? Was that a delusion? Oh, I don't care. Whatever it was, it reassured me that she was okay. And I never told anybody that. I never told my brother or anybody that, I told him later, years later. I said, just by the way, Sue, her name was Sue Scott, Sue Rector. that she came to me to reassure me that everything was okay. So I want to reassure you that everything's okay, that we're okay, you're okay, and everything's going to be okay. And so I want you to kiss your loved ones, and we will see you next time on a YouTube Live. Have a great weekend and have a great 4th of July, everyone. Bye bye.